In this video, we're going to explore the 5 most important factors in waking up from the dream of separation, otherwise known as spiritual awakening. These are a culmination of the qualities I've observed in people who wake up quickly. So we're going to touch into these 5 qualities, habits, behaviors, one by one. The first thing I wanted to say about this that might surprise people is that none of these 5 are meditation. I know it's crazy. I used to equate meditation with awakening, with enlightenment. Not that I thought they were the same thing, but I certainly had a belief that something about meditation, something about deepening a certain state during meditation, developing a state of deep samadhi, that is the fertile ground for shifting identity, for awakening. And it can be, and for a lot of people it is. But it's certainly not equivalent to awakening. The evidence I have for this is I've seen many people go through this process, but I've seen people go through it who have zero interest in meditation. In fact, they're pretty averse to it. And yet, because of some of these other qualities, some of the other orientations, behaviors and habits they engage in, they actually wake up very quickly. In fact, they wake up faster than many people who meditate. You can meditate for years, you can meditate for decades and not actually wake up. Meditation is not a detriment to the awakening process. In fact, I'm not against meditation at all. I very much enjoy it. I meditate quite a bit. I have meditation retreats where we do quite a bit of silent meditation. So it can quiet the mind. It can sort of till the soil for some of these other qualities to be able to take root. But in and of itself, meditation is not going to wake you up, in my opinion, in my experience. So with that said, there are people who would disagree with that. But I would suggest that the ones who really are kind of hardcore with meditation, very dedicated to it, and do wake up, are often doing some of these other things that are perhaps more subtle and less outwardly obvious as a behavior, and that's actually what's causing the awakening to progress. So take that as you will, but I just wanted to point that out. So the 5 things you can do, or the 5 orientations you can have or cultivate that will help you wake up. Number 1, and I do believe this is the most important, and without this, very unlikely would you actually wake up. And if you do, you'll fight it. You'll fight it all the way, and it'll be a very miserable experience. So the first quality to cultivate, the first orientation, is that you have a serious, authentic, sincere desire to wake up, to get to the root of suffering, to find a way to live a life of deep, profound, thoroughgoing authenticity, a burning desire to solve the problem of birth and death. These are different ways of saying the same thing. But the key is that it is a priority, and it's the priority in your life. The most important thing to you is to get under the identity structures that cause you to suffer, to see what's what, to live a life of deep authenticity, intimacy, interconnectedness, to undermine the perceptual filters that make us feel and think and operate as if we are separate entities in a world of separate objects. So I think that is the most important thing to cultivate, or part of yourself to explore. Without this, it's just very challenging. With this, it's amazing what will come to your aid. It is astounding the way the universe will rearrange itself to come to your aid to wake up. And with this, I really like to send the message that if you're listening to this and you resonate with it, you get what I'm saying, that you understand that there's something ineffable, something deep, something stirring in a deep part of yourself that you haven't been given permission to access, to fully let yourself die into, that it's okay, and you can do that, and you have every right to do that. It's your birthright. Your true nature is your birthright. So give yourself the permission if that's really your heart's desire, if that's what your heart of hearts says you want to do, then by all means. So that's the first and most important foundational factor in the process of waking up. The second factor that I find to be indispensable in this process is a willingness to go beyond the conceptual mind, a willingness to go beyond what you know, a willingness to let go of your logical traps, let go of the ways the mind binds you into reasoning, into overthinking, being willing to acknowledge that awakening is not something you can conceptualize. It's not something you can know with the mind. It's not something you can map. You really have to be willing to go beyond that, and it's uncomfortable, especially if identity is really, really tied into intelligence, into logic and reasoning. It can be difficult and painful and scary to actually disentangle identity from that. All of us that are mind identified, to some degree or another, will have our identity intertwined with intelligence, but some people really have trouble with this, and it's very important. And in fact, without this, it's quite challenging. You will unknowingly use your own intellect to keep yourself asleep. And you may do that in a spiritual way. You may do it by endlessly analyzing spiritual literature or spiritual concepts or maps, etc. This is not that uncommon. So if that resonates with you, if you feel like you may be the type to fall into that pattern, really look into that. Feel into the emotions that come up when you take the risk of going beyond what you know, completely beyond what you know. I have a good friend who's deeply realized, and he has a great saying, and he says, when you get to the end of what you know, you can turn back to what you know, or you can continue into the mystery. So in this case, I highly recommend continuing into the mystery. It's something I say to people in various ways, probably every day. One way or another, I just encourage them that, when they come to the edge of something that's completely unknowable, fear comes, disorientation comes, and I always encourage them to continue to take the next step, or the next surrender, or let go a little bit more, to trust the process of dissolution, the process of unknowing, unbinding. This is critical, and it has to happen at some point. So that's probably the second most important factor I see in or quality or habit in people who really wake up quickly, is they're willing to do that. They're willing to go beyond the cognitive mind, beyond the intellect, beyond the intelligence. The third most important quality to develop or factor in waking up quickly is a sort of ruthless authenticity, being completely honest with yourself with what's happening. If you're feeling fear, acknowledge it, at least to yourself. If you're feeling jealousy, competitiveness, loneliness, fear of loneliness, a lot of repressed emotions come up in this process. So be willing to acknowledge those experiences. And this ties into the second factor that we just discussed, and that is, if we tend to intellectualize things quite a bit, we're often overlooking these more vulnerable experiences, these emotional experiences, which isn't the end of the world, but it will really slow things down. A willingness to really feel, to let emotion move through, to explore emotion, and be willing to ask yourself, what's really happening? To ask a trusted friend, what's going on with me? What do you see? What do you feel in this? What am I avoiding if you can't see it? So a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to be ruthlessly authentic, especially about emotion, is one of the qualities I see in people who wake up very quickly. The fourth factor that I think is one of the top 5 in importance of qualities that allow people to wake up very quickly is the willingness to be uncomfortable. Doesn't mean you'll be uncomfortable all the time. It doesn't mean that this process is going to be torture. But there will be times when you're going to feel things you don't want to feel. There are going to be times when you will experience things you don't want to experience. There are going to be times when you'll see things in yourself that you don't want to see, or you don't want to acknowledge or admit that are there. When that comes, when you come to that place, a willingness to just say, okay, what's here? What's going on? Let me just look at it. Let me just experience it, feel it, and if it's uncomfortable, so be it. I'm not going to distract myself unnecessarily. I'm not going to continue to run from it. I'm going to just feel the discomfort. So it is tied to factor number 3, but it's more of a binary issue. It's comfort versus discomfort, and we generally like comfort and we generally try to avoid discomfort, and that's totally natural. But there are aspects of this that are going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to intuit, and this is important, you're going to intuit that this discomfort is actually lawful, that it's related to the awakening process. And being honest with yourself in those moments is really helpful. It's not like you have to purposely cause yourself to be uncomfortable. That's not necessarily helpful and can be counterproductive. But you will intuit when certain things come to the surface that are just, I don't want to say inherently uncomfortable, but conditionally uncomfortable. They need to be experienced and not reacted to. So a willingness to be uncomfortable at times is very important, I think. It's very helpful. Without that, you can wake up, certainly, but it does tend to drag out and be a little bit more of a confusing and disorienting process, because you're kind of fighting yourself. You're trying to use spirituality to feel good. So then, of course, you're avoiding what doesn't feel good about it, and there are things that don't feel good about it. So that's number 4. Number 5 is trust your intuition. Now, when I say intuition, I don't mean your thoughts. I don't mean your conclusions about the way the world is, or the way you are, or even the way spirituality is. I mean the intuition that goes deeper and deeper and deeper to a very quiet place, to a very present place. The intuition that leads you past thoughts and even past emotion, down into the depths, directly into the mystery. This may come to you in different ways. I've heard people describe it as a vibration, a portal, a deep silence. But I've worked with so many people who have acknowledged that, finally turning to that part of themselves that's been calling their whole life, that they've just been avoiding because they're afraid of it, they are socially conditioned to avoid it, or they've even been told overtly to avoid it. Once they give themselves permission to orient toward it, often this doesn't take long. So those are the 5 important orientations or factors that allow people to wake up quickly, in my experience. I hope this is helpful for you. Let me know in the comments if you resonate with this, if you agree or disagree, or if you want to hear more about any of these factors. Have a great day.